Tier 1, the snow was falling when I saw her last. This is gentle confessions where truth speaks in a whisper, and healing begins in the quiet. The snow was falling when I saw her last. Not the kind of snow that rushes down like a blizzard, or dances in the air like confetti. This was the slow kind. The kind that drifts silently, like thoughts you've buried but never forgotten. It was late December, just past midnight. I remember the way the street lamps carved golden halos into the white sky, and how every step I took felt like I was walking deeper into a dream I couldn't wake from. The town was asleep, hushed in that strange, sacred way only winter can manage. I hadn't seen her in months. We both pretended it was because of time, or work, or the weather. But truthfully, it was because we were scared. Scared of what would spill out if we sat across from each other again. Scared that silence would say more than our words ever could. When I saw her standing there by the bench outside the little bookstore, the one we used to meet at when we still knew how to laugh without restraint, my breath caught. Not because she looked different, but because she didn't. Same coat, same gloves, same way she curled her hands into her sleeves like she was holding something she didn't want to drop. She looked at me, not with surprise, but with something gentler. Like she had expected me eventually. Like the snow had whispered to her that I was coming. I wanted to speak. God. I had rehearsed 1,000 versions of hello, but none of them fit in that moment. They all felt too loud, so I just sat beside her. She didn't move away. We sat like that for a long while. No words. Just the hush of falling snow, and the occasional crackle of branches bending under its weight. And somehow, that silence said everything. I remember the way her breath fogged the air. Slow. Even. As if she wasn't angry anymore. As if all the pain had been folded into something softer. Like the way winter folds fire into smoke. She reached into her pocket. Pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Didn't hand it to me. Just held it. I knew what it was. A letter I never sent. A letter she was never supposed to find. I had left it on her porch one night, then changed my mind and came back to take it before dawn. But I was too late. She must have read it, must have kept it. And now, here we were beneath the quiet sky, with all our words already spoken between us. The snow kept falling, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel cold. Tier 2, what we left in the quiet. The quiet that followed her departure wasn't immediate. At first, there was noise, lots of it. The scraping of chairs as people left the coffee shop. The rush of the wind tugging at the door when it closed behind them. The whistle of the kettle in the kitchen. Then came the clinking of spoons, a distant ringtone, and the soft chime of the register. Life carried on in the moments after she left, but inside me, everything stopped. It's strange. The things we don't say. The things we tuck behind smiles and nods, polite goodbyes and passing glances. I sat there with my hands wrapped around a warm cup, no longer tasting the chamomile I had ordered. It was supposed to calm me, supposed to ground me. Instead, it felt like I was holding a memory. I couldn't quite grasp a memory that kept slipping through my fingers like water. When the noise faded and I finally stood to leave, the silence hit me in a way I wasn't ready for. It wasn't just the absence of her voice. It was the absence of everything we never said. The words we swallowed. The promises we didn't make because we didn't know if we could keep them. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The streets were quiet, muffled by a fresh white layer that turned even the sharpest edges of the city into something soft, like a painting blurred by time. I walked home that night slower than usual, as if my body were waiting for my heart to catch up, as if I could delay the moment I would step into my apartment and truly feel how empty the space was without her. I sat in the dark for a long time that evening, not turning on the lights, not playing music or calling anyone. Just me and the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the old clock on the wall, and the cold that managed to sneak in through the window panes. I wanted to cry, but even my tears were quiet. Just a warmth down the side of my cheek, unnoticed, like the way she used to brush her hand against mine in public, subtle, secret, sacred. The quiet became a character in our story. It wasn't just the space between conversations. It became the conversation. We had always been good at silence, she and I. It was how we first understood each other, through glances, through the way our feet touched under the table, the way we shared headphones on the train. It felt romantic back then. But now, the quiet had changed shape. It had turned into a weight I carried on my chest, pressing down on my ribs every morning I woke without her beside me. I found her scarf the next day, still looped around the hook near the door, like a question she forgot to ask. I held it in my hands for a long time, pressing it against my face. It smelled like her lavender and cinnamon, and something I could never quite describe. Something like trust. Something like home. It's funny how we keep remnants of people, as if they'll explain the story better than our memories can. I still had her book on the nightstand, spine worn from her fingers. I still had the mug she bought for me from that little shop in Quebec City, the one with the crack in the handle that she insisted added charm. And I still had her playlist saved on my phone. Songs I no longer played because they echoed too loudly in the silence she left behind. There were days I convinced myself she might come back, that the snow had only delayed her, or that she had taken a longer route home. I imagined her standing at my door, cheeks flushed, breath visible in the cold air, saying she had more to say, that we had more to share, that the quiet could be filled again. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into the kind of silence that doesn't ask questions anymore. The kind of silence that just is. I tried to move forward, the way people do. I took long walks. I wrote in my journal. I filled my time with things that looked like healing. But every time I crossed the bridge near the old bookstore, the one she loved, I would slow down. I'd stand in the middle, looking out over the frozen river, and wonder if she stood there too. If she thought of me when the snow started to fall. There was no message from her. No letter tucked under the door. No missed call or unsent email. Only the quiet, ever faithful, always waiting. And yet, within that silence, something began to grow. Not understanding, not closure, but a kind of reverence. A respect for the space we once filled, and the way it still held shape even in her absence. I realized that what we left in the quiet was not regret, it was meaning. And meaning, I think, is more powerful than answers. Some love stories don't end with full stops. They end with ellipses, a lingering pause, a whisper not quite finished. I still whisper to her sometimes, not out loud, not with words, but in the way I fold her scarf and tuck it into a drawer I no longer open. In the way I pass the coffee shop and glance at the seat she always took. In the way I choose chamomile tea. Even though I never really liked the taste, the quiet she left behind, it never really left. It became part of me. A companion on quiet nights. A mirror I sometimes avoid. A lullaby I never stop hearing. And though I never got the chance to say everything, maybe the quiet is saying it for me. Maybe it always was. Maybe in the end, what we left in the quiet was enough. Tier 3. The letter. She forgot to take a soft-spoken confession from a voice you once trusted. I found it by accident. It was tucked inside the second drawer of my writing desk, under a mess of receipts, old postcards, and a dried sprig of eucalyptus that must have come from one of her arrangements. I wasn't looking for anything that day. I think I was just trying to feel like I still lived here. Like this apartment still had a pulse, even if mine had quieted since she left. I unfolded the paper slowly, as if the air itself needed permission to touch it. The handwriting was unmistakable, delicate, slanted to the right, with a nervous loop in her YS. She always wrote like her heart was trying to escape the lines. It wasn't dated. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but I knew it was for me. And she never took it. Maybe she meant to. Maybe it slipped her mind in the rush of that last afternoon. Maybe she changed her mind and left it behind on purpose, knowing I would find it when I needed to most. The letter began like this: I don't know how to begin, which is why I'm writing instead of speaking. There are things the mouth cannot hold that the hands can let go of. I'm not good at silence, but I am worse at hurting you with noise. I read it in one breath, and again, slower line by line, as if each word were a stone skipping across a still lake. Her thoughts had weight. They didn't drift. They landed. She wrote about the things she was too afraid to say face to face. How she had felt herself, fading. Not from me, but from the version of herself she thought she needed to be for us. She wrote about the nights she stared at the ceiling, long after I had fallen asleep, wondering if she could stay and still be true to the soft voice inside her that had started whispering something different. She said she loved me. That much was written 3 times. I love you more than I can say in a room without trembling. I love the version of myself that exists in your eyes. And I love you enough to let go. That line. It stayed in me like a bruise. A kindness so heavy it hurt. She wasn't running. She wasn't angry. She wasn't tired of me. She was trying to be honest in the way we rarely are when it matters most. She signed it simply, with a single initial, as if the letter itself was a whisper she didn't want to echo too loudly. As if this, too, needed to stay between us and the quiet. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just sat there, holding that fragile sheet of paper, as if my hands could warm it back into her presence. I imagined her writing it at this very desk, most likely at night, when she knew I'd be deep asleep. I pictured her pausing mid-sentence, chewing on the back of the pen, unsure if she had the right to put feelings into form. And then I thought, maybe she wanted me to find it after. Maybe it was her way of continuing the conversation when words had failed us. There's something sacred about a letter that never gets sent. It lives outside of time. It isn't bound to the moment or the reaction. It just is a piece of someone's truth, floating, waiting, hoping. That night, I couldn't sleep. I placed the letter back in the drawer, but it might as well have been under my skin. Every word hummed through me. I heard her voice reading it in my mind, soft and hesitant, like she was standing behind me. I made tea and sat by the window. The snow had returned, thin and quiet, like a veil. The world felt far away. The letter felt close. I thought about the letters I never wrote to her, the things I assumed she already knew, the reassurance I should have offered more often, the fears I buried. Thinking silence was safer than vulnerability. Why do we wait? Why do we think there will always be more time? Maybe it's because we confuse love with permanence. Maybe we believe that if something feels right, it will last without effort. But love is not a fire that sustains itself. It is kindling. It is breath. It is constant tending. And we had both grown quiet. I don't blame her. Not anymore. I don't even blame myself. I think we were just two people doing their best to hold something fragile in a world that rarely slows down. What we had was real, beautiful, and quietly, maybe even bravely, unfinished. I've read the letter many times since. Each time, I find something new in it, a phrase I missed, a nuance that lands differently depending on the weather, the light, or the state of my heart. But one thing remains the same. She meant it. Every word. And even in her absence, those words build a bridge. Not back to her, but forward, toward who I'm becoming without her. I've started writing letters now. Not to her. Not yet. But to myself. To the parts of me I neglected while trying to be everything at once. To the moments I rushed past. To the apologies I whispered too late. They're not meant to be sent. They're just meant to exist. Like hers. Like love. Tier 4, where the wind carried her name. A soft-spoken confession for the sleepless and the sentimental. It was a Tuesday, though I'm not sure why that matters. But somehow, that detail always returns when I close my eyes. A quiet, overcast Tuesday, where the wind came early and stayed late. The kind of wind that slips between window panes and rustles things you thought were still. The kind of wind that seems to carry voices you haven't heard in years. That day, I heard her name in the wind. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't grieving. I was just existing. Washing a dish, maybe. Folding a sweater. The kind of task you do 1,000 times without meaning. But suddenly, it was there, her name. Whispered, or maybe remembered. Soft and clear. Like someone standing just outside the door. Not knocking, only waiting. I froze. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't have to. The name was already inside me, hovering just above my breath. That name that once lived in every corner of my day. The one I used to say more often than my own. And now, it had returned on the wind, like something sacred, something unfinished. I stepped outside. There was nothing special about the sky. It wasn't golden or moody or cinematic. It was just gray. A soft, sleepy kind of gray. The trees were whispering things I couldn't translate. The streets were half empty, with only the sound of leaves dragging against the pavement. I whispered her name once. Not loud, not desperate, just gently, as if to acknowledge it, as if to return the echo. And for a second, I felt her there. Not in a supernatural way, not even in a nostalgic one. More like the way a song makes you feel without lyrics, or how a scent can take you home even when you've forgotten the address. Her name had weight, but not like a burden, more like a thread. And I followed it. Not physically, emotionally. I let myself walk back through memory, not the kind you scroll through in your mind like old photos, but the kind that breathes. The kind that unfolds in silence, in motion, in sensation. I remembered how she used to write lists in margins, little things she wanted to remember, or feel, or forgive. I remembered how she always knew when I was about to speak, and how she'd tilt her head just slightly inviting, not interrupting. And I remembered the last time I spoke her name with love, not loss. It was a Tuesday then, too. Different year, different season, but same softness, same wind. She had fallen asleep on the couch with her hand still clutching a mug that had gone cold. I covered her with that gray blanket she loved, the one that always smelled like lavender in old bookstores. I whispered her name as I leaned down, not to wake her, but to wrap myself in the feeling of still belonging. It's strange what the wind brings back. Not events, not answers, but presence. A presence that doesn't ask for anything. Just that you remember gently. That you let go slowly. That you carry it forward with care. I think of her name now as something the wind owns. Something I don't need to repeat, but also never need to forget. Some days, I walk along the river and imagine what she might say if she were beside me. I imagine her telling me about a book she read, or how the sky looked different in a city I've never visited. I imagine her listening, even when I have nothing poetic to say. And on those days, I don't speak her name aloud. I let the wind do it. Because it knows how. Because it does it better than I ever could. Sometimes healing doesn't come in declarations. It comes in breeze, in the hush of tree branches, in the slow sway of curtains when no windows are open. And in those moments, her name feels less like a wound and more like a song I once knew the words to. I still don't know what to do with that letter she left behind. I've folded it and refolded it so many times. The creases have creases, but I don't read it much now. I don't need to. It's already memorized. What I do, instead, is listen. When the kettle whistles, when the pine trees shift, when the silence between one thought and the next feels a little too full to ignore, that's when I hear it again. Not always clearly, but always kindly. Her name, still walking beside me. Not haunting, not calling, Just being. Just enough. And sometimes, I think that's what love becomes when it has nowhere else to live. A name in the wind. A warmth in the quiet. A rhythm beneath the noise of everyday breath. I used to be afraid that forgetting her name meant I was letting her go. Now I know. Letting her go is how I carry her forward. And so, I whisper it once more into the air, into the trees, into myself. Not to summon her back, but to let the wind know. I remember. Tier 5. She trusted me. I stayed silent. A soft confession under the falling snow. She trusted me. That sentence has echoed in my mind more times than I can count. It's not a dramatic line. It's not poetic. It's not even particularly original. But it's the one thing I return to, night after night, when the world slows down and my mind picks up speed. She trusted me, and I stayed silent. There were so many moments tiny, forgettable to anyone else, when she looked at me like I was holding something sacred. And maybe I was. Not a secret. Not a plan. Just her. Her hopes. Her pauses. Her questions. She would let her sentences trail off, assuming I'd understand the rest. And I did. I always did. But I said nothing. It wasn't fear. At least, not the loud kind. It was the quiet fear, the kind that whispers. What if you break it by naming it, the kind that convinces you presence is enough? That listening is enough? That silence somehow means safety? But she wasn't asking for silence. She was offering trust. And I didn't know how to hold it. Not the way it deserved to be held. I think back to that night, the last night. The snow had just begun. Not thick or cinematic, just a light dusting. Soft and slow. She stood on the porch with her hands tucked into her sleeves, looking up as if she could read something in the sky. She asked me a question. I remember that. Not the exact words, but the shape of them. The tremble beneath them. Something like, "Do you think we'll still matter to each other in 5 years?" I remembered a silence that followed. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say so many things. But I froze. Like the air around us. Like the words were snowflakes I didn't dare disturb. So I looked at her, and I nodded. That was all. A nod. The most cowardly agreement. A half-truth. A gesture too small for the moment that begged for something real. And she smiled. That soft, sad smile you give when you know the answer already, but hoped you were wrong. She trusted me. With her questions. With her fears. With her quietest hopes. And I gave her silence. Years later, I still find myself wanting to rewrite that moment. Not with grand declarations, just with something true. I would tell her yes. We'll still matter. In different ways. In quiet ways. In the way that snow remembers the shape of your footsteps long after you're gone. I would tell her that she mattered more than I could ever say then. That the reason I was silent wasn't because I didn't care, but because I cared so much, it scared me silent. But she's not here. Only the wind remains. And the snowfall. And the silence I created. She used to write letters she never sent. I found one, once forgotten in a drawer she rarely opened. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but I knew it was for me. Sometimes, I wait for your words, the way I used to wait for snow quietly, with hope, even when I know it's not the season. I read it only once, then folded it back like I hadn't touched it. Because somehow, I still wanted her to believe I didn't know, that I hadn't seen her hope, laid bare in ink. She trusted me, and I stayed silent. Now, the words come too easily, but there's no one to catch them. They fall, like snow on an empty field, beautiful. Maybe, but unnoticed. I speak them anyway. Into the night. Into the quiet. Into myself. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finally answering. Even if the moment has long passed, I would tell her now. You were right to hope. And I was wrong to be afraid. You were braver than I was. And softer. And you deserved someone who knew how to speak even when it was hard. I think silence can be a form of love. But not always. Sometimes. It's just absence. And I gave her that absence wrapped in good intentions and dressed in gentleness, but absence nonetheless. She trusted me, and I stayed silent. That will always be the line I carry. Not with shame, but with softness. Because if I carry it right, if I speak it now, fully, honestly, then maybe someone else won't have to hold it alone. Maybe you, listening now, will say the words while there's still time. Will answer the question even if it scares you. Will speak, even if your voice trembles. Because someone, somewhere, is trusting you. And silence is not always kindness. This is Gentle Confessions, where truth speaks in a whisper, and healing begins in the quiet.